This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
Tonight's Waterfront makeover. Major improvements are on the horizon for Dartmouth. Facing charges, a Moosehead star player is suspended for 5 games after police allege he was driving while impaired. And in the buff, a hairless raccoon puzzles wildlife rescuers.
Our latest system clearing through tonight with some lingering clouds Saturday morning, but some sunshine into the afternoon for most. Your full forecast is coming up.
Good evening. For decades, one side of the Halifax Harbour has gotten more attention than the other. A rail line on the Dartmouth side has hindered development, but that could change. Halifax is planning major improvements to that waterfront. It could mean changing infrastructure, adding more public space, and even welcoming cruise ships. The CBC's Haley Ryan has the details.
The Halifax municipality wants people to start dreaming. What would make the Dartmouth waterfront better?
This is a rather big piece of planning. This is city building, really, is what we're talking about.
Last week, Council greenlit a plan for the waterfront that will include new public space and railway crossings. It will also design a new emergency route from Alderney Landing to Woodside that could handle vehicles.
I think it's tremendous and long overdue, so I'm excited to have that as part of the opportunity within this open space planning, and it's something that we really need.
McGregor says the plan will help Alderney Landing figure out how to expand. She says their theatre, gallery, and events are always full, and they want to do more. The new emergency route could also open up the waterfront for housing development.
The influx of residents has been a cornerstone in rejuvenating downtown Dartmouth. So more of that is actually quite critical.
Bringing in cruise traffic is also part of the plan. The Port of Halifax wants to build removable floating docks on the Dartmouth side of the harbour, but haven't named a location yet.
It really depends on the infrastructure that's over there and the acceptance by the community. We certainly wouldn't want to put any more than are wanted.
McIsaac says they could start with 25 ships a season and grow from there. Christine Bauer would love to see ships bring more tourists to Dartmouth. She co-owns the Wooden Monkey restaurant in Alderney Landing. Bauer says development, maybe more patios, would give tourists and Nova Scotians new reasons to visit.
It's really needed. I think this is such a beautiful place. We have sunset views like you can't even believe, and you really need to show it off. And there's a lot that can happen down here.
The Dartmouth Cove lands are also in the plan. It's a future growth area where the city wants to eventually see a new neighborhood. Nearby residents, like David Jones, are against a separate proposal to infill part of the cove, which will be decided by Transport Canada.
I think there are a lot of people that really care about this place and care about how we look to the future, especially with sea level rise and climate change.
As a teacher and historian, Jones hopes for more interpretive panels around the waterfront featuring local history.
It's always nice to have some attention focused on the Dartmouth side of the harbour. You know, sometimes we'll feel that we're being overshadowed by Halifax, but I do find more attention is being spent here.
The city will soon hire a consultant to create the waterfront plan, which will include public consultation. Haley Ryan, CBC News, Dartmouth.
For what could be the first time in Nova Scotia Community College's history, hundreds of union members are set to go on strike Monday. The Atlantic Academic Union has filed a strike notice to the Provincial Minister of Labour. Bargaining teams from NSCC and the union unsuccessfully met with a conciliator this week. The main dispute is salary. The union says members rejected the college's offer of a 7% to 8% increase. They say the offer was behind what other post-secondary institutions have received. A member of the Halifax Mooseheads is facing impaired driving charges. Jordan Dumais is the reigning MVP in the Q League, and he's been suspended for 5 games. The CBC's Paul Palmeter has the details.
It may have happened 2 full weeks ago, but now it is on the public record as one of the Halifax Mooseheads' greatest all-time players is now facing a pair of impaired driving charges. Halifax Regional Police say it was 2:20 a.m. on March 1st when they pulled over a vehicle for a traffic violation. That's when officers noticed signs of impairment of the driver and arrested him. Behind the wheel was 19-year-old Jordan Dumais, who will be in court April 9th to face the charges. Dumais was the MVP of the Q League last year, and in November, he broke the Mooseheads' all-time leading scoring record. In a statement released before last night's Mooseheads game, the team said Jordan Dumais violated the QMJHL and the team's code of conduct. Since this was an off-ice infraction, the matter was handled internally while the team remained in constant communication with the league. Dumais has not played in a Mooseheads game since December. He played for Team Canada at the World Junior Tournament in Sweden, but then underwent abdominal surgery in Columbus, where he was a third-round draft pick of the Blue Jackets in the NHL draft 2 years ago. The Mooseheads say Dumais is now healthy. He served the first of his 5-game suspension last night, and he'll be eligible to return to the Mooseheads lineup for the second game of the upcoming playoffs. Paul Palmeter, CBC News at Scotiabank Centre in Halifax.
A petition submitted to the city by the group Friends of Downtown Halifax is calling on the city to remove all homeless encampments from the downtown core. The group also wants the city to take action before the tents return.
This is a very sensitive area for commerce and business and tourism and activities. And it also asks that the city create an encampment management plan, which is really key. Both the city and our own sort of knowledge, they anticipate that 100 to 300 new tents will be coming this summer.
So far, more than 700 signatures have been collected. The Friends of Downtown Halifax group comprises of 250 members who live, work, visit, or have businesses in the area. A new data mapping tool is examining how the affordable renting housing stock has changed in cities across Canada over the last 2 decades. The Canadian Centre for Housing Rights created the tool with federal, provincial, and municipal data, to complete a picture they say has never been created before. It looked at Spryfield as an area that traditionally has had the most low-cost housing, but also the greatest loss of affordable units. Between 2016 and 2021, those units declined by 39%. Christina Carter is with Shibukto Connections, a nonprofit that supports low-income people in Spryfield. She says this data proves what she sees in her work.
There just is nowhere for people to go anymore. We had an individual worked all of their life. Now they live in a car or they're couch surfing. They have a pension, This is just the reality of it now. There is no place for people to move.
The Canadian Centre for Housing Rights says factors like building age and need for repairs or recent turnover in building ownership may help explain this loss in units. Wildfire season is underway in Nova Scotia. Daily burning restrictions will be in place until October 15th. Last year, of course, was the most devastating wildfire season on record in Nova Scotia, with major fires in Shelburne County and Upper Tantallon. Officials are urging people to abide by the rules.
So it's very important that people pay attention to the restrictions, and if they plan to do anything outside with an open flame, be sure to follow those restrictions and be very careful. Not just follow the restrictions, but make sure that if you do have an open fire, you know how to put it out, you can put it out, and if something were to happen, you have a way to call someone to help. So there's a lot of, you have to be prepared if you're going to have an open fire, and you have to be ready for that. Everyone has to do their part to make us all safe.
And I'll talk to Jim Rutterham with the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables about what ground conditions are right now, what they look like now that wildfire season has begun. That is our newsmaker just after 6:30. Well, the weekend is here. Sounds like tomorrow's pretty good.
Yeah, tomorrow's definitely the best day to get outside and enjoy, especially tomorrow afternoon. Amy, thank you so much. As we look at the satellite and radar picture, a few flakes flying today as expected, mixing in with these showers across the southwest half of the province. This is going to be moving out, though. This system is moving through at a pretty good pace, and so the tail end of this already starting to pull away from the coast of Maine, and that will continue to track eastward tonight. And in its wake, we'll get into a bit of an area of high pressure here, which will bring us some pleasant conditions, as we said, for Saturday. Now, Saturday morning, still some lingering clouds, so don't be discouraged, you early risers, that cloud is pretty thick early on tomorrow. Few lingering flurries tomorrow. Northumberland Shore, Cape Breton, Guysborough County, Eastern Shore. Those flurries, in fact, for Cape Breton may even linger into Saturday afternoon, whereas the mainland is going to clear quite nicely. Cape Breton, few breaks of sun possible throughout the afternoon on Sunday, but more so mid to late afternoon. That area of high pressure will keep us quiet through Saturday night, but the clouds already building back in through Saturday night into Sunday morning. Increasing southerly winds on Sunday, and yeah, some showers certainly crawling in throughout the afternoon, with some steadier periods of rain moving in late afternoon in through the evening, and yeah, a few flakes mixed with that as well. Note the temperatures this weekend, Saturday again, especially across the mainland, climbing into the mid to high single digits. Will be in the 2 to 5 range across Cape Breton both Saturday and again on Sunday. Note that the mainland likely in that 3 to 5 range on Sunday as well. Now, looking ahead into that system, should note that Sunday night will be a pretty breezy one as well. Widespread gusts, 50, 60, maybe even some 70 kilometer per hour gusts with this system as it tracks through. Could see some slushy accumulation for places like the Cape Breton Highlands, but generally a rain event. And the good news is by the time we get out the door on Monday morning, that system is gone, and Monday actually looks pretty pleasant. So some good news there. But if you do have plans for St. Patrick's Day, Amy, make sure that it does include an umbrella or a rain jacket, especially in the latter half of the day, as that rain will be moving in throughout the afternoon and evening.
That is some good advice. All right, thanks for that, Ryan.
Thank you.
Well, Northern Pulp has been granted more time to submit their environmental assessment application for a proposed new effluent treatment facility. Environment Minister Tim Holman signed off on the one-year extension last week. Holman released the terms of reference for the process 2 years ago, meaning the deadline for the company to submit its application was yesterday. The extension means the new deadline of March 15th of next year. A spokesperson for Holman says it's the department's role to review the environmental assessment when it's completed, while it's the company that decides on the timing of a proposed project. The Fish and Gear Coalition of Atlantic Canada says its annual funding with the Federal Fisheries Department runs out on March 31st, and there's been no indication it will be renewed. The nonprofit gathers and recycles ghost gear across the region. It's old fishing gear. When it's no longer in the possession of fishermen, it becomes pollution. The coalition currently has 15 collection sites in Nova Scotia, 5 in PEI, 4 in New Brunswick, 1 in Newfoundland and Labrador, and another in Quebec.
When fishing began 60 years ago, we were using more natural materials, more biodegradable materials. We were using wooden traps, more cotton-type netting that would biodegrade after a period of time. Today, because we need the material to last longer and to be able to endure the environment, we're making that product out of plastic products, which are not natural. They do not break down in the environment. Instead, they break down into microplastics, and they last for thousands of years.
In an email, a spokeswoman for the Federal Fisheries Department says there was no update at this time on future funding for the Ghost Gear Fund. Now to a new Fifth Estate investigation into an operation here in the Maritimes, accused of defrauding vulnerable foreign workers and even the Canadian government. And as Stephen D'Souza shows us, some of it was caught on camera.
Okay, hi. How are you?
Using his cell phone, Yan Liu secretly recorded meetings with immigration consultants that he says offered him a Canadian work permit for more than $30,000 for a job on Prince Edward Island and the promise of permanent residency. Both, he says, turned out to be fake.
I felt like I might have been scammed, but I didn't want to believe that because they promised me a real job.
Liu first came to Canada from China legally to help his autistic daughter go to school. Now he's one of dozens of workers who filed abuse claims against this orchard on PEI. In 2014, Canadian nectar products started with big names like former Deputy Prime Minister Sheila Copps backing it. Within 2 years, Copps and some of the founders were gone. Then problems began. In 2022, Canadian nectar was raided by the Canada Border Services Agency, accused of being part of a network of companies applying for permits for jobs that didn't exist, with one company allegedly charging illegal fees for work permits.
They're making money in a multitude of different ways, one of which is selling people a false promise of what this country is. They're scamming people.
The Fifth Estate found the federal government gave 31 workers connected to Canadian Nectar permission to leave the farm after they filed claims of abuse.
The whole experience was like a nightmare for me.
Canadian Nectar did not respond to requests for comment.
I was furious again, yes, at the employer, of course, but more at the government that is allowing this type of systemic issues to happen.
But even after all those complaints, the companies have not been fined or been barred outright from the foreign worker program. Employment Canada would not comment, citing privacy, while the CBSA would not confirm if it's still investigating. Stephen D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
Marine Atlantic has retired one of its ferries. The MV Atlantic Vision marked its final voyage from Port aux Basques, Newfoundland to North Sydney this afternoon. The Vision has been in use for 15 years. A new hybrid fuel vessel is in transit now and will arrive next month. The new ferry is called the Alisuanu, which is Mi'kmaq for traveler. An animal rescue center in Seaforth has a new, not so furry friend. Hope for Wildlife has taken in a hairless raccoon. The raccoon, affectionately named Rufus, was found outside of Port Hawkesbury. Have a look.
It was called in by some good Samaritans that knew exactly what it was. They were worried about it, of course. I mean, just frostbite alone would be enough to push this animal over the edge. But he had no frostbite, which is really one of those mysteries. But they were concerned just because of the way he looked. They weren't sure whether he could have dermadex or mange or, maybe carrying something that could be contagious. We don't feel that that's the case. It doesn't look like she's carrying any parasites. She looks really healthy. It just lacking hair. He could be described as a bit feisty, but that's only to be expected, as most of our wild patients are. But he's nervous. He's really scared. I think he's been through a lot. I may apply and ask permission from DNR and see if they might possibly let him live out his time here. We'll keep our fingers crossed and we'll ask permission when we figure out what exactly is wrong. He may, under good supervision and good diet, he may grow back some of his fur and he may be releasable.
Coming up, Russia's election is underway, but the result is pretty much a certainty. Vladimir Putin will likely be re-elected for a fifth term. And details about the state funeral for the former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney are starting to take shape. And Ryan's up next with his full weather forecast. We'll see you after the break. All right, so we made it to Friday.
Yep.
Weather not great.
No.
Kind of a little unsettled, huh?
Getting it out of the way, though.
Yeah.
Because, again, this system a few days ago was looking like it might arrive kind of a little later than it did today. And so that, because it arrived a little earlier, means we'll be clearing out a little earlier for Saturday, which is great. It is a good thing, for sure. Not everybody's seeing the wet weather today. Cape Breton, beautiful spot here, of course, Highland Village. And, yeah, just cloudy there and not bad. Bit of snow still on the ground, too, there is notable. And
yeah, well, they got a lot of it.
It's true. Iona there, Highland Village, cloudy skies, overcast skies with temperatures right now near 2 degrees. And yeah, as we look at those high temperatures today, well, certainly not seeing those high single digits and low double digits like we were yesterday, but certainly still not bad. 7 degrees along the Northumberland shore for today. That was our hot spot. Again, furthest away from that system, which has been crawling through the region as we look at those temperatures out there right now. We've dropped to the freezing mark in through places like Western Head, and that is indeed where we've been looking at those flurries mixing in the Halifax metro area and down into the southwest. With this system that's been passing through, you can see those winds have been generally light today. Looking at easterlies right now, sustained near 20, gusting to 30 in Yarmouth. That's kind of our strongest wind. And yeah, this system starting already to taper off here on the backside. Not as much precipitation coming through Digby County into Yarmouth County now. Most of that steady stuff now crawling up through Shelburne County into Lunenburg County. And that is on our way out. Now, this system, again, moving out. We are looking at this area of high pressure. It's a thin one, but it's in there, and it's going to be edging in to give us a little bit of a reprieve for tomorrow. And as we look into the long-range forecast, we're watching this next system brewing for Sunday. And it will, again, be working its way in throughout the afternoon and into the evening. No temperatures, not really looking too extreme and on the hot end or the cold end. Yellowknife and Iqaluit is where you have to go to find the coldest of air. And yeah, creeping up into the high 20s, low 30s here in through the extreme southern parts of the U.S. and around the Gulf of Mexico. Tonight, temperatures are going to be dropping into the 0 to -1 range. The winds will be light. They will be northerly, though. You can see these arrows here with a bit of a northerly component to the wind on the backside of this system as it does move out. And yeah, into the time frame tomorrow, still some lingering clouds in the morning. Now, looking at some flurry chances tomorrow morning along that Northumberland shore into Cape Breton as well. But you can see a mix of sun and cloud developing throughout the morning for most of the mainland. I think Sheet Harbour to Guysborough into Cape Breton, you folks are going to have to wait a little bit longer for things to clear, but I am optimistic that even you will see at least some sunny breaks tomorrow here in the extreme east, but not as much sun as we will see here in central and western areas. That's where we'll really get into that mix of sun and cloud tomorrow afternoon. That's where temperatures will pop into the 6, 7, 8 range for tomorrow before things cloud up towards the later afternoon, but more so throughout the evening. Temperatures in Cape Breton, given that cloud cover in the mix, I'm expecting will be around 2 to 4 degrees tomorrow with those winds relatively light. And again, best chance of precipitation will be in the morning. Can't rule out an isolated flurry, though, lingering even into the early afternoon. 5 to 7 degrees for the Northumberland and Eastern Shore tomorrow with those winds in from the north. Again, they'll be light, but they will be there. So if you're right along the Northumberland shore, be mindful that that wind will be a bit cooler. 7 to 8 degrees for the Northumberland, for the Fundy and Valley region, with winds light here as well. 6 to 8 degrees for the South Shore. Bit of an onshore wind for places like Yarmouth, and again, light winds here, so it will be a little bit cooler right along the coast, and light winds for the Halifax area as well, with temperatures ranging between 6 and 8. So that is definitely our best outdoor day. Though Sunday afternoon will be dry, cloudy but dry, and then we're looking at those showers moving in with some steadier periods of rain in behind. Shower chances even for early Sunday morning in the west. It looks like, though, it's going to be the afternoon before any shower chances creep as far east as Halifax and the eastern parts of the mainland. And the best chances are going to be the later we go into the day. Periods of rain for Sunday evening with breezy south to southeast winds gusting 50, 60, even some 70 kilometer per hour gusts along the coast can't be ruled out as this system tracks through. A lingering isolated chance of a shower on Monday, primarily into the afternoon, just popping up but definitely looks like a pretty nice day on Monday. Shower and flurry chances kind of wrapping around that system on Tuesday. Spring arrives on Wednesday, and that looks like a pretty good day at this point, Amy.
That sounds good.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. We'll take it. Thanks, Ryan.
Thank you.
And up next, I'll talk with Jim Rutterham, Director of Fleet and Forest Protection with the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables. And I'll ask about his concerns as wildfire season officially got underway today. That is our Newsmaker. Stay with us. You're watching CBC Nova Scotia News. Today is the official start of wildfire season in Nova Scotia, with daily burning restrictions now in place. It's on the heels of two major fires last year that burned more than 25,000 hectares of land and 200 homes across the province. Jim Rutterham is the Director of Fleet and Forest Protection with the Department of Natural Resources and Renewables. Well, as you know, Nova Scotia had its most devastating wildfire season last year. As this new season begins, what are your biggest concerns?
For that to happen again. We certainly don't want that to ever happen again. So hope everyone remembers that. And I know we're all prepared, and hope everyone else, if they're going to have a fire outside or whatever they decide to do, they're very safe and they follow our burn safe restrictions.
Well, can you talk to me about what the conditions are like right now?
Right now, most of the province is free of snow. There are places, of course, that still have snow, but the majority of it is free of snow, which means, well, snow does not burn. Snow doesn't burn, so that's always good. But it's still damp in the province, which is nice as well. But it only takes a few days of warm, dry weather with a little bit of wind to make those surface fuels very volatile, and they'll burn very quickly. So that's our concern right now.
I know Cape Breton, other parts of the province got a lot of snow, but there are other sections, southwest Nova Scotia that didn't get very much.
Yeah.
Is that a concern?
It is, of course, yes. Even the areas that received a lot of snow, that snow was gone as well. And in the west, we didn't have near as much snow in the west, and that's been gone for quite some time. So again, we have yesterday was a nice warm day in the province. The fuels start to dry out very quickly, the grasses and stuff on top of the surface. So it's always a concern. A few days of that in a row, and we will start to get fires.
Now, we had so much rain following the wildfires. Did that have any impact?
Well, I'm sure it filled up our water table, which is always good. But again, at a certain point, the ground just gets so saturated, it doesn't hold any more water, and it runs off. But again, even if the ground is full of water, the surface fuels can still get very dry, and they burn quite readily. So,
well, have there been some lessons learned from 2023?
Well, every time you go into an incident, you certainly learn stuff. I think the biggest learn for our department was that we have a portion of our department is actively and always works with fighting wildfires. Last year, we were very strained, of course, and a lot of our department that normally wasn't involved in fighting wildfires were activated to help with the wildfires. So they have that experience now, and they have that knowledge and that awareness. So if it were to happen again, there is a plus that way, that we have a lot of more people now that are aware of what they can and cannot do and where they can help out the best for us. That's good.
So you feel you have adequate resources if, heaven forbid, we end up in a similar situation?
Well, every agency has enough resources for the normal times. Last spring, of course, was not normal for us, like it wasn't for a lot of other agencies across the country as well. So we can only really get ready for the norm, and as the norm changes, of course, we'll expand and contract to that. But right now, I know we're ready, and hopefully we won't have to be as ready as we were last year ever again.
Now, besides the daily burning restrictions, what else do you want Nova Scotians to be aware of as we go into wildfire season?
Well, I think that's what we like to focus on. Those daily restrictions, they're not set as a whim. They're set based on science. They're based on weather readings from all around the province. For each county, we're very confident of the data we receive from those weather stations, and that's how we set the burn restrictions. And it's not just that particular day; it's a cumulative reading that weather stations record this, and it's built on a database that tells us how dry all the fuels will get, and that's what makes us know when fires burn really deep into the ground, because those fuels are dry as well too. So it's very important that people pay attention to the restrictions, and if they plan to do anything outside with an open flame, be sure to follow those restrictions and be very careful. Not just follow the restrictions, but make sure that if you do have an open fire, you know how to put it out, you can put it out, and if something were to happen, you have a way to call someone to help. So there's a lot of, you have to be prepared if you're going to have an open fire, and you have to be ready for that. Everyone has to do their part to make us all safe.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. Jim Rutherham, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, at least 3 people are dead after tornadoes ripped through the Midwest U.S. yesterday. Welcome back. Russians began voting in a presidential election today. The first ballot hasn't been counted yet, but there's no doubt the election will end in victory for Vladimir Putin. The CBC's Briar Stewart reports.
This is not the image the Kremlin wanted to see on election day, but just like other forms of dissent, this fire at a polling station was quickly snuffed out. There were a handful of protests across the country. Someone threw a Molotov cocktail at a polling station in St. Petersburg. This woman who dumped green ink into a ballot box is under investigation. Still, millions cast ballots, not only across Russia, but also in Ukrainian territories under its control. But everyone already knows what the outcome will be. The best president we've had since the Second World War. It's our President Putin, said this man. We don't expect anything good. Everything will be bad, said another. 3 other names are on the ballot, but they're all Kremlin loyalists. Any meaningful opponent has been barred. Absent any kind of race, some of the polls looked more like a spectacle. In Siberia, a shaman performed a ritual blessing. At another polling station, voters could pose beside a cutout of Tucker Carlson, who interviewed Vladimir Putin last month. But close to Russia's border, officials accused Ukraine of shelling the area, killing at least 1 and trying to intimidate voters. These enemy strikes will not remain unpunished, Putin vowed. Now on track to win his 5th term as president.
Go like, hello, it's me, I'm president once again. Why bother? It is getting chilly in Moscow.
Ivan Golitsyn lives in Moscow and talks about life in Russia on his YouTube channel. But he's now making plans to leave before Putin is inaugurated again.
So he can do whatever he wants. And, considering what's going on right now and considering that there's probably going to be another wave of mobilization, I don't want to be waiting here like last time I did.
Voting will continue throughout the weekend. Supporters of opposition leader Alexei Navalny, who died in an Arctic penal colony last month, are planning an active protest. They're urging people to turn up at noon on Sunday. And if they want to vote, they're asking them to spoil their ballot or vote against Putin. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
The Israeli military says the first of 2 ships has delivered much-needed aid to Gaza. About 200 tons of food and water have been unloaded onto trucks to help alleviate the humanitarian crisis. In Tel Aviv, meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected the latest ceasefire proposal from Hamas, but did agree to send a delegation to Qatar to continue talks. Journalist Alex Cadier has the latest from Jerusalem.
On those ceasefire talks, there has been movement in the sense that Hamas had presented its counter-proposal, which includes a trade between female and injured as well as elderly hostages being held in Gaza against what they ask for 700 to 1,000 Palestinian prisoners. They also say that these ceasefire negotiations have to lead to an end to the war and the full withdrawal of Israeli troops, something Israel cannot contend with. Prime Minister Netanyahu has responded. He called Hamas's proposals ridiculous and unacceptable. But he did say a delegation of Israeli negotiators would go to Doha and Qatar to continue negotiating with those mediators. That is certainly a significant shift from the last mediation. That was in Cairo, and Israel did not send a delegation at all. Now, the other sticking point, however, is that Prime Minister Netanyahu has approved the military operation in Rafah, one that Joe Biden called a red line.
President Biden has been very clear that given the large number of civilians in Rafah, about 1.4 million, many of whom, as the foreign minister said, have been displaced from other parts of Gaza. We have to see a clear and implementable plan, not only to get civilians out of harm's way, but also to make sure that once out of harm's way, they're appropriately cared for.
So the U.S. wants to see that implementable plan to certainly reduce the civilian casualties in Rafah. That has not been forthcoming yet by the Israelis. But what has happened in Gaza is that first ship of much needed, desperately needed aid has arrived in the strips. 200 tons of flour and rice and proteins for those quarter of the population in Gaza, which the UN says is on the verge of starvation. It will be a symbol of hope, perhaps a symbol of change. It will not solve this desperate humanitarian catastrophe on the ground, but it may be the beginning of a bigger maritime corridor to work towards a solution. Alex Cadier for CBC News, Jerusalem.
We're learning more details about the state funeral for former Prime Minister Brian Mulroney. He died on February 29th at a Palm Beach, Florida hospital. He was 84. Mulroney will lie in state in Ottawa on next Tuesday. The Governor General of Canada and Prime Minister will speak. Members of the public will be able to visit and pay their respects from 12:30 p.m. Eastern to 6 p.m. Also from 9 to 1 next Wednesday. There will be a book of condolences available to sign on site. A lying in repose will take place at St. Patrick's Basilica in Montreal next Thursday and Friday. The funeral ceremony will take place at 11 a.m. on Saturday, March 23rd in Montreal. Eulogies will be read by Caroline Mulroney, Justin Trudeau, Pierre Carl Pelledo, Wayne Gretzky, James Baker, and Jean Charest. Brian Mulroney served as Canada's 18th Prime Minister from 1984 to 1993. One of the prosecuting lawyers on Donald Trump's election interference case in Georgia has stepped down. It comes after a judge overseeing the case said the lead prosecutor could remain on the trial on one condition. The lawyer on her team that she'd had a romantic relationship with had to quit. Trump's lawyers argued it was a conflict of interest. The CBC's Richard Madden takes a look at what led to the resignation.
Well, this long-awaited decision by Judge Scott McAfee said District Attorney Fani Willis can stay on the case, but he also gave a blunt ultimatum. If she stays, her former romantic partner she hired to lead it, lawyer Nathan Wade, cannot. The judge said their relationship showed, and I'm quoting here, a tremendous lapse in judgment, but added there wasn't enough evidence to suggest a conflict of interest or the grounds to toss the case out entirely. He wrote, dismissal of the indictment is not the appropriate remedy to adequately dissipate the financial cloud of impropriety and potential untruthfulness found here. Now, this decision comes after 2 months of high drama inside that Georgia courtroom when one of Donald Trump's lawyers accused Willis of financially benefiting from the case by hiring her romantic subordinate, Nathan Wade. The pair took to the stand and were grilled on their relationship by Trump's lawyers on national TV. The pair admitted they once dated and took lavish vacations together, but say they did nothing wrong. But in this ruling, the judge said the appearance of a relationship justifies one of them has to go, saying Special Assistant District Attorney Wade can withdraw, allowing the district attorney, the defendants, and the public to move forward without his presence or remuneration, distracting from and potentially compromising the merits of this case. So this is a partial victory for Fani Willis, although her credibility may have taken a hit, but it's a bigger legal setback for Donald Trump and the election interference case against him. His lawyers are looking for ways to delay or dismiss the criminal case altogether, and the judge's ruling means it will continue, albeit without one of the key prosecutors. For now, the proposed trial date is set for August, so today's ruling leaves open the possibility that Donald Trump's criminal trial on attempting to overturn the last election could begin before this next one in November. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
In the U.S., at least 3 people have been killed in western Ohio after suspected tornadoes ripped through the region last night. Dozens of people were injured, and police say more bodies could be found in the wreckage. Many homes and buildings were left damaged, and power was knocked out for thousands. Funnel clouds were also spotted in eastern Indiana. About 40 people were reported injured. The storms were part of a huge system that stretched from Texas to Pennsylvania and put more than 45 million people under threat of severe weather. Well, Canada's big 5 banks are making tough financial times even tougher for their customers, according to a CBC Marketplace investigation. Bank employees say they're pressured to push products that can cause financial harm. A hidden camera test captures tellers upselling and financial advisors giving advice that's not just wrong, say banking experts, it's against the law. Erica Johnson has this report.
We're going undercover into Canada's big 5 banks.
I'm just here to make a deposit, actually.
Testing what happens when we approach the teller wicket.
We have a credit card limit increase for $8,000.
Oh, okay.
If we're qualified to get a pre-approved personal line of credit.
So you're able to get a credit card with us.
Current and former bank employees tell us the pressure to meet sales targets can be overwhelming, even lead to bad financial advice, says this BMO employee who recently quit. Someone else is reading his words to protect his identity. He still works in finance.
I felt like I had to mislead customers in getting products that they didn't need.
Lines of credit, credit cards, good for the bank, potentially bad for you.
You might not realize how much this is a dangerous thing to have. It can add up really fast.
This TD employee resorted to secretly recording coaching sessions with her managers. Someone else is reading one manager's words, heard pushing this employee to upsell customers.
You think of them a lot, so that's why you don't want to put force on them. It kind of backfires for you in meeting your goal.
TD says that conduct is completely unacceptable and not in line with the bank's policies. Back on Hidden Camera, we also visit financial advisors of the Big Five, ask about the fees we pay on mutual funds. Several advisors incorrectly say the fees are only charged on the profit, not the whole investment, like this BMO advisor.
They take it out of your returns.
The Bank Act spells out employees can't take advantage of customers. So this bank critic's take on our Hidden Camera test?
They're not only getting bad advice, they're getting illegal advice.
The Canadian Bankers Association says our findings do not represent the experience millions of Canadians have every day. We requested an interview with the federal finance minister, Chrystia Freeland. She declined, and when we caught up with her at an event...
We're hoping to speak to you about a story we're doing about sales pressure within the banks.
Freeland's office later sent a statement saying the government has zero tolerance for banks offering misleading or inappropriate advice and has added consumer protections to the Bank Act. Protections that were already in place when we did our Hidden Camera test and that critics say need to be enforced. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Toronto.
A population crisis is taking shape in Manitoba, not in humans, but dogs. Abandoned numbers are high, and there are calls for an all-out initiative to get new births under control. The CBC's Cameron McIntosh has the latest.
Not necessarily problem dogs, but the sheer number of them is causing problems in some parts of rural Manitoba.
So there's an overpopulation crisis here in Manitoba.
Karina Growinski leads one of 45 animal welfare agencies calling for a $2.5 million increase in provincial funding for spaying and neutering.
There's lack of vet care in many rural communities. And what happens is that this becomes a situation where packing of dogs can happen.
In situations that have gone unchecked, there have been cases of dogs turning feral, resulting in attacks, as dog rescue agencies say they're unable and under-resourced to keep up.
We're basically on our own running volunteer organizations to the best of our ability, but some days it feels like we are really failing.
And running up against a lack of space to foster rescues in other communities. The Winnipeg Humane Society, Manitoba's largest shelter, is at capacity.
We will continue to work on behalf of animals that have been abandoned.
The provincial government says it's working to expand a rural spay and neuter program. More details are expected in next month's budget. While Winnipeg itself isn't being overrun, the head of Animal Services says there could be better coordination of local bylaws governing breeding, licensing, and provincial supports.
If you had basic laws like that, plus you had high volume spay and neuter being brought in by rescues and the government, you'd see those populations go down over time.
In the meantime, animal welfare groups say given the risk for bites and attacks, parts of rural Manitoba should be considered under a state of emergency. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Celestial enthusiasts are preparing for the upcoming total solar eclipse in April, and Canada Post is marking the event with a stamp. It depicts the moment of totality as it passes over 3 communities in Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland, showing the precious few moments when the moon completely covers the sun. The stamp also glows under black light, and we'll have special coverage of the eclipse on April 8th. Base metals helped Canada's main stock index eke out a gain today, while U.S. stock markets were down. Here's a look at the markets as we head to break. news you can trust. We have the latest on what's happening in your community and a weather forecast you can rely on no matter where you are in Atlantic Canada. I'm Amy Smith.
And I'm Ryan Snoddon.
Join us for Atlantic Tonight.
Right after the National.
Yeah, so tomorrow afternoon sounds like the prime time to get out and enjoy the weather.
Those are going to be the best hours of the weekend for many folks, no question, and most of us, I should say. Though tomorrow morning, a little cloudy, but not bad. A few lingering flurries in the mix. Well, we'll run you through it in a sec. Let's first and foremost show you our viewer picture of the day. This one, we're going to Cape Breton, and I was waiting for this. I knew it would come. We've had some snowdrops, but these are the first crocuses we've had on the show.
Beautiful. Nice to see.
They certainly are. Hope.
Spring's eternal, right?
Indeed. Gord McKenzie, thank you so much for that. From Grand River, Cape Breton, really appreciate you sharing. And yes, we'll see temperatures pretty nice tomorrow afternoon with that sunshine breaking out. Now, cooler across Cape Breton, looks like we'll range from around 2 to 5 degrees. Should see some 5-degree temperatures for inland areas of Cape Breton tomorrow. But the clouds lingering longer there with some flurry chances lingering even into the early afternoon. So, just be mindful of that. Not a bad day, though, overall. Sunday, looking at clouds building in through Saturday night. Sunday, cloudy start, showers arriving into the afternoon with some steadier rain into the evening. There goes that low that's bringing us the unsettled weather today. There's that afternoon time frame. Note those few flurries lingering for the Cape Breton Island region, and then that high pressure area moves in, but it's not a very dominant high, so the clouds move right back in Saturday night. Shower chances Sunday morning in the west, but for the most part, for most of us, it is going to be the afternoon when those showers move in, then periods of rain for Sunday evening, mixed with a few flakes. Could even see some slushy accumulation over the Cape Breton Highlands before things clear again into the Monday time period. Spring looking like a decent day on Wednesday.
I like it. All right, well, you've heard of plant-based meat that's grown in labs.
How about meat-based rice? That makes you wonder, where's the beef?
Researchers in South Korea have managed to grow beef cells in rice grains. The pinkish hybrid beef rice has a much lower carbon footprint than farmed cattle meat. It's said to have a beefy flavor and a slightly buttery, creamy taste.
With 18% animal-based protein, the rice is also rich in essential amino acids. While it may not actually replace beef anytime soon, researchers see it as a major step towards sustainable and affordable source of protein.
You go first, Ryan.
Yeah, no, you first.
That's it for us tonight. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you next time.
Have a great weekend.